Mike in Fredericksburg, thanks for waiting.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear
We
you.
can.
Okay, long-time listener, first-time caller. I got to say, I really like you guys, and I'm kind of annoyed with you at the same time. Reason being, when I first started listening to you guys years ago, I was very much a fundamentalist Christian who took the Bible completely literally, very much indoctrinated into Christianity from a very young age, extremely religious family. And the more I listened to you guys, the more valid arguments you were making, the harder time I had holding on to the literal translation of Scripture. And at this point, I self-identify as an agnostic.
We can fix
I'm
that
not
too.
quite-
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I was just saying we can fix that too, but I was mostly making a joke.
Oh. Well, I'm not quite ready to self-identify as an atheist yet. Although,
Do you believe in God?
We'll see where. What's that?
Do you believe there's a God?
I don't know.
You're probably an atheist.
But
I want to say yes, but I can't reasonably justify it. I say yes because, I mean, just to be blunt, I've been indoctrinated into it so long. It's very
Right.
hard
Sure.
for me to let go of the concept of there not being a God, or it's hard to let go of there being a God. Put it
Yes.
that way.
that's absolutely normal, and it differs from person to person as to how difficult this is. And there are people who try to stay in some fictional middle ground between I believe and I don't believe. There is no such place, but they try to stay there and some of them manage to stay there for a long time. But you had an actual question, and I want to make sure we get to it.
Yes. I've been at that point for about a year, just FYI.
Okay.
My question is, as I'm working through all these different things of do I believe, do I not believe? One argument from a Christian standpoint is that God perhaps created the earth with age. I know there's ample evidence of the earth being millions and millions of years old, and I started off not believing that years ago, but I do believe the earth is millions of years old now. And as I'm trying to work through this question, what would your viewpoint be on someone who made the argument of, well, perhaps God created, but he created with millions of years, i.e., if the argument was made, oh, well, God made Adam and Eve and he put them in a garden. He didn't put them in a garden with seeds and say, quick, grow some trees before you starve. He created the garden fully grown, given the idea that God can create with age. What would be your response to that?
So they worship a trickster god who plays tricks on people?
Well, I wouldn't say plays tricks. I'd say,
Well, that's a pretty serious trick to play on somebody, because
To
if
create a world and make it look like it's been there for millions of years
Yeah.
and developed through natural processes when it didn't.
yeah, because then everything else that we use for dating things, it kind of starts to fall apart. And so then how do you trust anything? How can they trust that the sun's going to rise tomorrow?
But even if they were to say that,
that's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my first kind of response to this. But even if they were to say, okay, God's got some reason for doing this that is ultimately good that we're just not aware of. Okay,
Sure.
So set aside this issue of the fact that I can't trust this God. What evidence do they have that this is actually what happened? That a God created the universe and then intentionally made it look old? And I ask this for a couple reasons, because there's no reason to believe something until there's sufficient evidence for it.
Right.
But the solution that these people are proposing is adding more unbelievable things. So if you said, hey, there's a God who created everything, that's one level of problem that you would need to provide evidence for. And now they're adding to it, saying not only is there a God who created everything, but this God intentionally created everything and made it look like it wasn't created, which adds another layer of complexity to the entire issue. And if there's no evidence for one, then I don't see how you're going to get to the other.
Right.
And
Because the
isn't
burden
it-
of proof
isn't
would
it
be on
more-
the creationist saying that God did create with the appearance of age. Well, if you're making a truth claim, then the burden of evidence is on you.
Right. And isn't it more reasonable, though? I mean, so set aside this issue. First of all, people think that atheism is necessarily that there are no gods, when really it's the rejection of theistic claims. We do not, you're selling, not you, but someone is selling the idea that there's a God who created everything, and in this case created it to look old like he didn't create it. So you're selling that, and we're not buying it. And we're not buying it because you haven't met your burden of proof, but it's worse than that, because isn't it more likely that people started with this idea that there's a creator God, And when the facts of the universe conflicted with the God model that they had, they then make up an ad hoc hypothesis that attempts to keep their God and fit with the new evidence. And if this is what's happened throughout history, and this continues to happen, so the more we find out about how the universe actually works, the more they modify their God model to fit it, what's the likelihood that they're getting closer to the truth about how God works, or that they are leading the evidence towards the conclusion so they can hang on to this cherished idea that they have?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that, but it seems more likely that they'd be holding on to an idea while ignoring the evidence and where logic would point.
Not only that, but if you take a look at the world, how many different gods have been proposed as explanations for things in the universe?
Thousands.
Right. How many
Thousands.
of them? How many of them have turned out to be the correct answer?
None of them that we're aware of.
None of them have turned out to be the correct answer. And so what we do know, and since these gods conflict, this culture's concept of God is incompatible with this other culture's concept of God. So they cannot both be correct, and it's possible that neither of them are correct. And so if we live in this world where we know that human beings are inventing gods out of whole cloth to serve as explanations, and then modifying the God they believe in so that it better fits new information as we discover it, isn't it just likely that this is all a product of what human beings are doing, trying to explain the unknown in the universe, and that if there was in fact a God, either it wouldn't be this trickster God that creates something and makes it look like he didn't have anything to do with it, but also this God could easily give us information and correct our misunderstandings. And how many times has that happened?
Outside of the life of Christ, where some could argue that.
Why would you say outside of the life of Christ? There's no demonstration that that's God giving any more information than it was for Moses or Krishna or anybody else. Yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying a fundamentalist Christian would argue that the life of Christ is evidence of God giving us information we didn't already have.
Sure, and a Muslim would say that Muhammad is, and people would say that for Krishna or Vishnu or anybody.
Well, can I move on to a
Sure.
second thing I wanted to talk to you about?
Sure.
One thing that's very difficult for me, because I've been indoctrinated into Christianity from such a young age, is Pascal's wager. And I know you've talked about it before, and I don't want to make you cringe because I know I've heard you say in the past I don't want to talk about this anymore because you've talked about it so many times.
I actually produced for my Patreon project, it was the very first video. It's about 30 to 35 minutes long. It goes into great detail about every little thing that is wrong with Pascal's wager.
Okay.
So, I mean,
yeah, that's just one thing that I struggle with, because the idea, like I realize that all the evidence points to Earth being millions of years old, and I realize that I haven't come up with solid, provable evidence to convince myself, let alone anyone else, that God is a reality.
Sure. So what is it about Pascal's wager that you struggle with?
It's the idea of if I choose to believe in God and I'm wrong, then I don't really lose anything. I've just lived a good life. But if I believe in God,
How do you know you haven't lost anything or that you've lived a good life?
Good by my own standards, good by my own judgment.
Well, if you're living a good life by your own standards, why is God relevant? Shouldn't it be good by God's standards if you're believing in God?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would make the argument, if I try to live my life in according to the morals that God has laid out in Scripture, if there is a God,
So
and I live relatively
which
close to
Scripture?
that. What's that?
Which Scripture?
We'll just take one that is very common. Do unto others.
No.
Like
Oh, okay. So you're going to go with like
The golden rule.
cherry picking a single verse from the Christian New Testament to believe in that God. What if you die and it turns out the Muslims were right?
Then I'm in Muslim hell, or whatever they call it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
What if the Jains were right, or the Scientologists, or the Jews, or any of them? How do you
Then
make a decision about which God to worship?
That's a difficult question. I'm just saying for myself, I was born into Christianity and indoctrinated into it by my family and everyone around me. So that's what is.
But if you're going to use Pascal's wager, which is basically this idea of it's better for me to believe than to not believe, that's only true if you pick the right God and worship him in the right way.
No, it's true.
So what happens if you actually picked the right God but do it wrong? Like, do you think you can fool a God?
No.
So
If there is one, then
if
no.
you're not actually convinced that God exists and you're just saying, I better believe in him just in case, do you think that gods are going to fall for that?
Well, it's the fear of hell for me.
So should you then work to seek the best heaven or avoid the worst hell? I mean, set aside Christianity. What if there's some religion that has a worse hell than Christianity? Isn't that the one you should believe to avoid their hell?
Not if I believe Christianity and Christianity says that other one's false. I mean, but you're right. There's no good mechanism to determine which religion would be true.
Right.
It's
so
just
isn't the
for
best thing
myself,
to do just
living
to
in America?
isn't the
Go
best
ahead.
thing to do in that situation when there's no mechanism to tell the difference about which one's more likely true, to simply say, I don't have enough information and I don't see the possibility of finding enough information to determine which of these is actually true, if any of them. And so instead, I'm going to live an honest life, acknowledge that I don't know. I'm going to try to live right. And if there's some being I find myself facing in an afterlife, then either that being will recognize that I lived honestly and good and reward me for that, or if they decide to punish me because I wasn't genuflecting and on my knees as a sycophant, living the type of life that they wanted, and they punish me, then they're a moral thug who I had no business worshiping in the first place.
Yeah, and it's just easier said than done when your entire family thinks one way and everyone around you thinks one way. And if you were to come out and say, I don't believe and here's why, then your social circles crumble and, your relationships with family and people that you love and hold dear crumble or could crumble, because it's what they believe and that's what they brought you up as and it's what you professed for years that you believed it, and then to come out and say that. I'm just saying it's easier said than done. There's not any fault in your logic, but it's hard to do that when there's such enormous social pressure from family and loved ones.
Yeah, and almost every atheist that's out about it has faced that very situation.
Yeah, we're not telling you come out.
You're not alone. This is not unusual. You need an atheist community, and if there isn't one near you, start one.
Yeah, and one of the things is that, when we talk about this, we're not necessarily, I'm not arguing with you with the goal of having you say, yep, I'm an atheist, and now I'm going to go tell everybody no matter what the consequences are. I'm just getting you, I'm having this discussion because you're actually talking about two different things. You're talking about, on one hand, what you find believable and don't, in which case I would say that generally speaking, you would qualify as an atheist under most normal definitions. Then you're talking about how you want to personally label yourself, and actually you're talking about a third thing, which is how you want to personally label yourself and represent yourself to family and friends. Because you call us and say that you're agnostic, you're probably not telling your family and friends that.
No.
Right. And we're not telling you, we're not saying, now I want as many out atheists in the world as I can, because I think that this sets up a world where it normalizes atheism, where people know that the neighbor down the street that they like is a non-believer, and this changes their perception of it. But don't come out unless you are willing to face all the potential consequences, which could mean a destruction of your social circle, financial situations. If you think your life is going to be more miserable, it could be in danger. I mean, if you're in Bangladesh and you're an atheist, they're going to kill you, as they've done a number of bloggers. If you are worried that you're going to be ostracized from your family or that they're going to just make life miserable for you forever, you're under no obligation to come out. But that's a separate issue. If I have any goal here, it's to free people's minds. What they do with it after that is up to them. So if you're acknowledging that under normative use you'd be an atheist, you don't believe that there's a God, you don't find any compelling reason to believe this, and then you have a comfort level where you want to identify with some people as an agnostic and with other people as a believer, that's all understandable. We're not saying there's no risk.
Well, to go with the definition of atheist being, is there a God? The answer being, I don't know, then yes, I would fall under that. But what I'll say is I really want to believe in a God because it would make so many things a lot easier. And I'm trying to look for any evidence that I can find, and any path I've gone now to look for evidence
I'd really
has
like
been
to
destroyed
find
by
out.
rationality.
I'd really like to find out that the lottery ticket I bought was a winner. I mean, I really wish that was true.
Yeah.
But seeking to confirm what you want is not the way to go about life. It's not.
Oh, it's true.
It is in fact more harmful, because you are then creating thought processes that result in false beliefs, things that you don't have any reason to believe are true. And those things don't live in a vacuum. The process by which you evaluate God might be how you evaluate investing your money. You know, if some con artist comes up to you and tries to sell you a bit of goods, and they use a version of Pascal's wager, which convinces you that you've got nothing to lose from investing your money and everything to gain, and you've bought into this idea of Pascal's wager that, well, you know, this is the culture I'm in, and so this is the best bet, that's how you're going to end up broke. But I appreciate the predicament you're in, and that you're willing to think about it and evaluate things. And it's a process. It takes a different amount of time for different people. Not everybody gets there.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to do for a lot of people. For others of us, it was far more important for me to be appreciated for who I am, and to honestly be who I am to everybody. And Jen is famously said, and I've quoted her a gazillion times, that you're family when you act like family. Yeah. And I don't care that much that I happen to be blood kin with someone. Jen is family.
Right.
More so than many of the people who are relatives to me. And I think it's a sad testament to the culture that we tend to live in, that we prioritize the fact that we're blood related to someone over whether or not we have something in common with them, whether or not they're willing to respect us and appreciate us for who we are. Because if I have relatives who only want to care about me so long as I go to their church and believe their things, then they don't care about me. They care about a fictional construct of me that lives in their head. And I'm not going to be that person. But I could be if I valued that more than being honest about who I am, and if I was more concerned about the potential consequences. And that's up to each individual to figure out on their own.
Oh, with my family, religion and family love, they go hand in hand. Like I can't see them easily separating the two. Like it's such a core part of who they are. It kind of makes me, you know, as you touched on, a little frightened of what would happen if I were to tell them, you know, I just wasn't sure I believed in any of it.
I will say
but
this.
Hey, oh, go ahead.
Because I already talked a little bit about Greta's new book.
Yeah.
But Greta's previous book was about coming out and the consequences and why. And one thing that she points out is that collecting over 400 stories of atheists who came out and what their experience was like, only one of them actually regretted it. Some of them went through some incredibly difficult times. I went through difficult times with my family and other relatives, and it moved on. We'll never get back to the old normal, but there's a new normal, and things were not nearly as catastrophic in the end as what I had predicted. There was only one of all the people she interviewed who legitimately wished they had never come out. For most people, it doesn't end up as bad, but you know your family, and you'll have to make the decisions on your own.
Well, Matt, I want to thank you and Jen and all the hosts for what you guys do and what you've done for years now. Because, like I said, when I started listening to you guys 3-4 years ago, I was very much a hardcore literalist Christian who thought the earth was 10,000 years old. And it wasn't because I was stupid. It's because I hadn't been exposed to good arguments against it.
Yep.
And you guys have had me thinking for years and self-questioning and researching for years, and I hope to never stop thinking and trying to figure stuff out and say what makes the most logical sense. But like you said, it is a process, and it's not something, after being in the religion for like 25 plus years, it's not something that I can easily have myself walk away from for me personally, but it's something that I am drifting further and further apart from. I'm just not ready to say that I completely turned my back on it, because it's a personal process and a personal struggle, and there's personal thoughts of, oh God, if I'm wrong and I'm in hell, then that's going to be terrible. But then I ask myself, do I have any rational reason to believe in that? Like we were touching on, and the answer is no.
How much time have you spent worrying about some other religion's hell?
None.
Yeah.
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 What's that tell you?
that I wasn't indoctrinated into that religion
Yes.
and don't really care about it.
Indoctrination's a powerful thing.
I know people who've been atheists for 50 years who will wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares of hell. They don't believe that it's true on any intellectual level, any cognitive level. But this is true in other areas as well. Like, I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or any of that stuff. And I can assess it rationally and skeptically. But if you take me and you put me in a dark, creepy, quote unquote, haunted house for the night, I can't guarantee you that I'm not going to get creeped out by noises and other things, because there's another portion of our brain that doesn't care what you intellectually understand. It operates based on feelings. And when you have been indoctrinated into, oh, the weirdness and a fear of the unknown, your brain can manifest fears that you know are irrational. And yet you are somewhat powerless to really come to grips with. And it takes work to get to the point where you say, okay, I don't believe this, I'm either making stuff up. So don't beat yourself up over it too much. And I wish you luck, and I hope that whatever you decide, you end up having a happy, productive life.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
and
Mike.
I'll call you guys back if I have future questions or thoughts to discuss in the future.
All right, please do.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Cool.